Have you ever spent an entire day thinking about something someone said for only a few seconds? A comment, a criticism, a look, a message that felt cold, a moment that seemed dismissive, and somehow it stayed in your mind long after it happened. You replayed it, analyzed it, wondered what it meant, wondered what it said about you, wondered if you had done something wrong. Most people believe they are suffering because of what happened, but often they are suffering because of the story the mind creates afterward. Buddhism teaches that emotional pain becomes heavier when the ego turns every experience into something personal. Every criticism becomes an attack. Every disagreement becomes rejection. Every silence becomes judgment. Tonight, I want to explore why human beings take things so personally through Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness, and modern psychology. Because perhaps emotional freedom begins when you realize not everything is about you. Maybe you know this feeling. Someone seems distant, and immediately your mind starts searching for explanations. Did I do something wrong? Someone criticizes your work, and suddenly it feels like they criticized your worth. Someone disagrees with you, and somehow it feels like rejection. Many people live with a nervous system that is constantly scanning for social threats, looking for signs of judgment, looking for signs of disapproval, looking for signs they are not accepted. Psychology explains that human beings are deeply sensitive to social belonging. Throughout history, acceptance meant survival, rejection meant danger. So the brain evolved to pay close attention to how others respond. But in modern life, this sensitivity often becomes excessive. The mind starts interpreting everything personally, even experiences that have little to do with us. But what if most people's behavior says more about them than it does about you? That possibility changes everything. Buddhism teaches that every person sees the world through the lens of their own conditioning, their fears, their beliefs, their wounds, their expectations, their experiences. Which means when people react, they are often responding from their own inner world, not yours. Someone's criticism may come from insecurity. Someone's anger may come from pain. Someone's distance may come from their own struggle. Yet the ego immediately assumes this is about me. Awareness creates another possibility. Instead of personalizing everything, you begin observing more clearly, and clarity creates freedom. Here is the gap many people never notice. They want peace, but constantly make themselves the center of every interpretation. Someone is quiet. It must be about me. Someone seems irritated. It must be because of me. Someone disagrees. It must mean I'm wrong. The ego creates these stories automatically, and because the stories feel believable, suffering follows. Buddhism teaches that attachment to identity creates emotional pain. The stronger the ego's need to protect its image, the more easily it becomes wounded. Every opinion feels threatening. Every criticism feels dangerous. Every misunderstanding feels personal. The result is emotional exhaustion, not because life is attacking you constantly, but because the mind interprets ordinary experiences through a deeply personal lens. But something powerful happens when you stop making everything about yourself. Life becomes lighter. Conversations become easier. Criticism becomes information instead of injury. Disagreement becomes perspective instead of rejection. Silence becomes neutral instead of threatening. Buddhism teaches that freedom grows when attachment to ego softens. You stop needing constant validation. You stop defending your identity constantly. You stop carrying every comment for days. And slowly, emotional resilience appears. Not because nothing hurts anymore, but because you no longer add unnecessary suffering to every experience. You begin responding consciously instead of reacting automatically. There is a Buddhist story about a man who receives an insult. Instead of reacting immediately, he asks, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The answer is obvious. It remains with the person offering it. The Buddha used this teaching to illustrate something profound. Not every insult needs acceptance. Not every judgment requires ownership. Not every opinion deserves a place inside your mind. Modern psychology supports this idea. Emotional suffering often comes not from external events alone, but from interpretation. The meaning we attach to experiences shapes emotional response. Two people can hear the exact same criticism. One becomes devastated, the other remains calm. The difference is not the criticism. The difference is identification. Mindfulness helps create space between event and interpretation. And in that space, emotional freedom becomes possible. Maybe emotional maturity is not learning how to avoid criticism. Maybe it is learning how not to be controlled by it. Because no matter how carefully you live, people will have opinions. The real question is, how much power will you give them? The ego has one primary job: protect the image of who it believes you are, which means whenever that image feels threatened, emotional discomfort appears. Someone challenges your opinion, ego reacts. Someone ignores you, ego reacts. Someone succeeds where you struggle, ego reacts. Buddhism teaches that attachment to identity creates endless vulnerability. Because identities are fragile, they require constant protection, constant validation, constant reinforcement. Awareness begins dissolving this pattern. You realize you do not need to defend every thought, every opinion, every version of yourself. And that realization feels incredibly liberating. Taking everything personally has a hidden cost. It keeps attention focused inward constantly. The mind becomes occupied with what do they think of me? How was I perceived? Did I make a mistake? Was that about me? And eventually, life becomes exhausting because your emotional state depends on external reactions all day. Buddhism encourages a different perspective. Instead of obsessing over perception, focus on awareness, focus on intention, focus on presence. Not every thought deserves analysis. Not every comment deserves emotional investment. Not every judgment deserves your energy. One of the most powerful ways to stop taking things personally is compassion. Because compassion reminds you everyone is carrying something invisible. Fear, stress, pain, insecurity, grief, confusion, which means many reactions have very little to do with you. The angry person may be suffering, the critical person may be insecure, the distant person may be overwhelmed. Compassion softens personalization, not because harmful behavior becomes acceptable, but because understanding replaces unnecessary interpretation, and understanding creates peace. Maybe the reason taking things personally feels so painful is because the ego turns ordinary experiences into personal threats. A comment becomes rejection, a disagreement becomes attack, a misunderstanding becomes proof of inadequacy. But Buddhism reminds us not everything requires ownership. Not every opinion deserves belief. Not every criticism defines you. And perhaps emotional freedom begins when you stop carrying other people's opinions so heavily. Life becomes lighter. The mind becomes quieter. Relationships become healthier, because now you are no longer trapped inside constant interpretation. You are simply present, aware, open, free. If this conversation resonated with you, tell us in the comments, what is one situation you used to take personally that you now see differently? And how would your life change if you stopped carrying other people's opinions so heavily?